on special right triangles. Page 558. And your focus question for today will be, what rules do I need to remember regarding special right triangles? What rules do I need to remember regarding special right triangles? There are two types of special right triangles. The first type we're going to talk about is a 45, 45, 90. And the second is a 30, 60, 90. In the 45, 45, 90 triangle, it's an isosceles right triangle. In this right triangle, if one of the angles is 45 degrees, one of the acute angles is 45, the other one has to be 45 degrees. Since the two base angles are congruent, then the sides opposite those angles, those are also congruent. So if this leg is equal to x units long, then the other leg is the same. It's x units long. The rule you need to remember about this type of triangle is that if a leg is x units long, then the hypotenuse is x times the square root of 2 units long. So if you're given one of the legs in a 45, 45, 90, and you're asked to find the hypotenuse, okay, I put these arrows in here, meaning I'm given this, and I need this. I multiply by the square root of 2. If I'm given the hypotenuse and I'm asked to find the legs, well, then I divide by the square root of 2. It's that simple. Let's talk about the 30, 60, 90 now. All right, in the 30, 60, 90, let's make that the 30-degree angle, and this will be the 60-degree angle. The side opposite the smaller acute angle is the short leg, so we'll call it L. In a 30, 60, 90 right triangle, the hypotenuse is always twice as long as L. So it's going to be L times 2. The longer leg. All right, the side opposite the 30 is the short leg. The longer leg is the side opposite the 60. The longer leg is the shorter leg times the square root of 3. So if you're given the shorter leg and you need the hypotenuse, you multiply by 2. If you're given the shorter leg and you need the longer leg, you multiply by the square root of 3. If you're given the hypotenuse and you need the shorter leg, divide by 2. And if you're given the longer leg, the side opposite the 60, and you need the shorter leg, you're going to divide by the square root of 3. Those are the rules regarding special right triangles. The 45, 45, 90 has two sides that are the same, so you deal with the square root of 2. A 30, 60, 90 right triangle, well, there's a 3 that starts the 30, 60, 90, so you deal with the square root of 3. So let's do a couple of example problems. In a 45, 45, 90, there's only two types of questions they can ask you. They can give you the hypotenuse and ask you to find the other two sides. So if you know the hypotenuse, how do you find one of the sides? Take 10 and divide it by 2 square root equals 7.07. If that side's 7.07, then this side is 7.07. Now, let me show you something. The questions come up in another class about keeping your answer in simplest radical form. And here's what they meant. If you're given the hypotenuse and you're asked to find a leg in a 45, 45, 90, and you're told keep your answer in simplest radical form, the hypotenuse is equal to 10. So to get the leg, you divide by the square root of 2. 10 over the square root of 2 is radical form. Now, it's not simplest radical form, though. Simplest radical form cannot have a radical in the denominator. So when you have a radical in the denominator, you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the radical that was in the denominator. So in this case, you multiply the original fraction by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. Now watch what happens. 10 times the square root of 2 is 10 radical 2. And the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. But the square root of 4 is 2. That's called rationalizing the denominator. It gets rid of the radical that's in the denominator. Now you can simplify the fraction. 10 over 2 simplifies to 5 square root of 2. There's your answer in simplest radical form. The super easy problems are when you get a 45, 45, 90 and you're given a leg. Say you're given a leg that's 8. Well, you know the other leg is 8 because it's a 45, 45, 90. The hypotenuse is just 8 times the square root of 2. That's it in simplest radical form. Or you can calculate 8 times 2 square root equals and 11.31. Decimal form, simplest radical form.
Do you have to have it in both forms?
You just got to have it in the form that they ask for. I think you should do it in both forms just for practice. All right, so that's 45, 45, 90s. That's 45, 45, 90s when you're given the hypotenuse and then when you're given a leg. So let's talk about 30, 60, 90s. We'll start off with the easiest situation first. 30, 60, 90 right triangle. And you're given the short leg. It's 5. If the short leg is 5, what's the hypotenuse? It's 10. It's twice as big. And if the short leg is 5, what is the long leg? 5 square root of 3. 8.66. That's as easy as it gets. Hypotenuse is twice as long as the short leg. The long leg is short leg times radical 3. All right, second situation. In the first problem, you were given the short leg. So let's say you're given the long leg. And asked to find the other two sides. All right, to get from the long leg to the short leg, you got to divide by the square root of 3, right? So if you take 10 and you divide it by the square root of 3,
5.77.
we're going to do it, we're going to simplify the radical first, and then we'll put it in the calculator. So 10 divided by the square root of 3, you got to rationalize the denominator, so you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 3. 10 times the square root of 3 is 10 radical 3. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is 3. This cannot be simplified. That's as simple as it gets in radical form. So this is 10 radical 3 over 3. The decimal version is 10 divided by 3 square root, 5.77. Now, that's your short leg. There it is in simplest radical form. There it is in decimal form. Now, in simplest radical form, the short leg times 2 is the hypotenuse, right? So if you take 10 square root of 3 over 3 and you multiply it by 2, you're multiplying it by 2 over 1. 10 times the square root of 3 times 2 is 20 square root of 3. 3 times 1 is 3. And the 20 over 3 won't simplify. So in simplest radical form, the hypotenuse is 20 square root of 3 over 3. if you want to put that in your calculator, that's 20 times 3 radical equals, it's 34.64. Leave it in there and just hit divided by 3, and you get 11.55. All right, so the first example we did, you were given the short side. Second example we did, you were given the long side. What's left? Given the hypotenuse. So right triangle. 30, 60, 90 right triangle, and you're given the hypotenuse. Let's go with, oh, I don't know. Hannah, what's your favorite number?
3.
Okay, 3. Hypotenuse is 3. If the hypotenuse is 3, the short side is 1.5. Half of 3. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. The long side is 1.5 times the square root of 3. In simplest radical form. And 1.5 times 3 square root, 2.6. In decimal form. Does anybody have any questions about the two special right triangles we just talked about?